We're on overtime today.
You might
Yeah,
want to
Central
central
Daylight.
I'm with you.
his home. He's got it. Okay. Doing the judge.
Judge.
How come I'm only 325?
Morning, good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, yes. No, you picked it up on Friday.
Or Patty got
Patty gave it to him on Friday. He's got what he needs. It's pretty written all over.
5 minutes early is a lot.
Did Patty stop and give you the paperwork on Friday?
Yeah, but he was gonna, the estimate on IRA money. Coming out of.
Oh. I don't, I would recommend doing that. I would not recommend doing that since you don't know if it's gonna happen. Okay, well, wants to know what the estimate of what's gonna come out of the budget from ARPA money. I mean, out of the general fund?
Morning.
That's not. Out of the general fund.
They lost their water down over the weekend down at the diesel. It had to be a mess.
Oh, I talked about this. When it was.
Of course, I didn't. Yes,
I'm the man. I'm the man.
I need.
I don't know.
Yeah, kid that works up at Farley. His name was, his last name is Miguel.
Oh.
Okay. So I did.
Okay, all right. Give me a chance.
Which is what they talked about doing.
Oh, we're there up there. I didn't. Yeah. No.
Yes.
105, I think it's
Take my own seat and then I can throw stuff in the drawer.
It's only 100,000.
For my phone. You know, when we won that launch, that was, I mean, that was the first off the house. Remember you told me, perfect time.
So the bike shop, we're talking about that.
I mean, you got water in places, but it's like, okay, it's not gonna work.
I mean, there's.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I am not a fan.
No, I know that was- One year. I did one when I was, cycling back my house. When I booked the trip, it's not there.
Next time.
Yeah.
Call the meeting to order.
You know, there's some around.
Already, rock and roll.
Some of that, if it's that bad, it may be one direction too. You know, I mean, we've seen fields in some years.
Arlen McLean,
Here.
Jim Sheeline,
Here.
Tom Kitson,
Present.
Doug Farster,
Here.
Rick Humphrey,
Here.
and Larry Mamini. We're good to go.
What we're hoping to get done today,
In the mic, please, Arlen.
Jim had talked to Paula
Here.
Yeah, and the mics.
to get the mic. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay. We want, Paula did some information of what total funds, broke it out, so we're gonna have her explain that. Jim's been working on that. I worked with a couple people on the IRA funds. And in a real ballpark area, it looks like the possibility of about $900,000 could be diverted from operations. That, and it's, you know, it's real up in the air, but I thought we need to have some idea of where that's at, so. Then the sheriff called Jim and wanted to be with us again, so we assume, I didn't call him back.
And I tried calling him this morning as I was coming in. And-
Okay. So he'll probably be here. I assume we'll let him talk a little bit. So hopefully at the end of the day, we'll have sound information to start making decisions and get this budget done. Questions or comments? Paula, let me turn it over to you.
Okay, so after our last discussion, our last budget hearing or whatever it was, don't remember, we ended up with $100,000 to the good, primarily because we took 100,000 out of the health department levy and put it into the general fund. So that brought us to about 100,000 to the good at that point in time. If you look at what was handed out with an 8/11, August 11th date on it, we were like 106,000 to the good. So since then, the changes that have made, the probation came back, the state reimbursement from probation is 50,000 higher. So we got another 50,000 there. And then in a conversation I had with Rick last week, I did transfer out $400,000 out of the general fund so that we would, that is the one-time zoning fees. So usually they get about 150 annually. We budgeted 550 because there's a couple of major alternative energy projects coming in. So that's taking that money basically and flushing it right back out through a transfer to the capital fund. So that pulled another 400,000 out, which now brought us to a negative 250. And then I did add in all the 5 sheriff employees that he's requesting now. He's now, I think he's adjusted his request to 5, and that totals about 275 after I adjust out a little bit for overtime and adjust out money for part-time. That's about 275,000. So that brings us to in the hole of about 525,000. So that's where you are right now.
And I'm sorry, where's that reflected in the material you just gave us, Paula?
Okay. So the material I just gave you on page 2 is where I added in. Okay. Reflected. Okay. So the probation increase is reflected on page 1. Right towards the bottom, it says 425,000. And I used to have it as 375. So that's one of the changes right there.
What do you have that labeled? Or I'm having a hard time finding that one.
State of Illinois reimbursement for probation.
825.
Sorry, it's 1, 2, 3. It's 6 from the bottom. Page 1, 6 from the bottom.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Switch gears on you there, sorry. And then on the second page, I've got highlighted, starting with the 71,900 and going down to the negative 50,000. All of that is the 5 sheriff's department employees. So it's their value of their salary plus benefits, and then some savings in the part-time line item and the overtime line item. So that's your 275,000 there. And the 400,000 is on the last page, page 10. There's a capital transfer that used to be 350, and I now changed it to 750. So that's where those changes are reflected from the 8/11 numbers that I gave you, the August 11th numbers that I gave you.
So the conversation that I had with Paula was that my concern is that when we have these one-time monies in our regular budget, people seem to forget that where they come from and that they're just one-time money. So I wanted her to normalize what our expected zoning fees are every year, and then put your one-time money, put it in a separate basket so we can look at it and see what effect this stuff has on our budget, because we make decisions based on the bottom number. And if it always looks like it's positive, we always think, well, we got plenty of money to do what we want to do. And then the reality is these projects ever dry up or go away, then you don't.
Which they eventually will.
So that's kind of what I mean, the money's still there. It's just not.
Yeah, makes total sense to me.
Several years, we've been living on that money. Getting this
Right.
miles, and it's not gonna last.
So Paul, is it possible to do a summary?
try again.
So if you took the one-time money in IRA and whatever, we have a very profitable budget this year, if you want to put it on that basis, but Rick's right. A lot of that doesn't project to next year, but can we get settled, at least in our own head, what we have to the good now this year? I mean, if you were going to give us a figure, because this includes the $15 an hour raises, includes the sheriff's request totally. Is there anything else in here that is major? It includes IRA money in capital. Correct? It doesn't have it pulled out at all.
The capital is on this other page that I handed you. So the capital is not in the general fund now. I'm sorry, what did you ask?
Just trying to figure out how good or bad we are this year, and then we can go to the future. You know, if you're doing a P&L, our best estimate of going to end up this year in a projected budget.
Right. So you're looking for a projection?
I'm looking to see what our base will be of income this year with expenditures, capital, whatever. But
We are 515,000 in the hole right now. Oh, you mean the current year that we're in? The year that ends this November?
next year's, the budget. will-
Next year's budget, right now, we are 515,000 in the hole.
So we're 500,000 in the hole,
Yep,
and that's with,
that's with transferring out that $400,000 of zoning fees.
so of that 500,000 in the hole, we got 400,000 we're transferring out to capital or whatever.
Right.
So really on a business basis, not a book basis, we're $100,000 in the hole.
Yes,
Would we all understand that before we go forward? Is that okay, Rick?
I understand, but the problem is the year after that.
Oh, I
This is
didn't-
where, that's
didn't
why
say-
I wanted it to show the reflect.
Didn't say that.
Yeah, no, I understand.
And also this reflects all the requests from the department.
Yeah, this has every
This has everything.
request in, all the capital requests,
yes, yes,
yes.
yes, everything is, yeah.
So it has us funding,
Except for the sixth person that the sheriff dropped off.
No.
Correct.
it's in there.
No, not the sixth
No,
one.
the sixth one is not in there.
Five, just five.
Changed his request to 5.
Okay.
Question, 3 deputies and 2 911 or jail.
Two
people,
corrections.
But he.
I believe so.
eliminated The 911 staff.
Correct.
So
That-
correct
that-
me if I'm wrong, if we end up using operations money that's in there now to capital or to IRA, they thought there was about, that was a public health levy because of what they get from whatever, and I don't remember, there's a couple more that we'd be to the good 400,000. That's why I tried to figure out is where we are, and then we can go to the second thing when we do the projections. Because it was very hard for me to figure where we were on a P&L. So you guys got questions on that, or you feel good at what we know? I just wanted to make sure you guys knew where we were at.
Right. Well, I think main questions is we basically have 2 main questions that are before us, and that is the additional staff that the sheriff is requesting. And then we have to also deal with the salary adjustments that's on page 1.
Page 2.
Or page 2, yeah.
So those are the 2 big exceptions.
Right.
That are in the budget now on that $100,000.
Well, there's other things, but those are probably the 2 biggest ones.
Those are the 2 biggest ones that we have to do. Yeah, there's other minor stuff that is,
One of my questions is the insurance.
I'd appreciate some discussion on, is this is including giving everybody under $15 an hour, 215, and anybody who was still under 15 would get the $2,000 raise.
Well, right. Okay, so on page 2, I don't like this. It's good. On page 2, there's like 250 some thousand. That's just in a contingency line item for when negotiations end. And then you'll know what you're going to have to pay, but negotiations aren't going to be over for either of the Teamsters probably before we have to put this budget on file. So that's just a holding place right there until negotiations are done, and then you'll know what you're paying people.
I had Paula run a spreadsheet of salaries with that, and it also trying to figure out what it shows. 301,000, is that possible? If we gave the same raise you give to the lowest person all the way across?
Yeah, I'm not sure which one you're looking at, but yeah, there's a number of different pieces of information. So you're just looking at what the FOP received? Yeah. I don't know what he's.
Go ahead.
No, she was asking,
Well, I'm just trying to get our base because it's been moving around all over the place, so.
what, the 301, what are you looking, where are you coming from?
This is the question that if we gave everybody $15 an hour this year, so anybody under 15 gets 15. I also thought that this was included, and that's my question, to raise everybody else got so they didn't get compressed.
Right.
And is that correct?
So, I mean, I don't know that I would focus so much on what that dollar amount is because you really don't know what you're going to do for raises. But so,
Yeah, this is just estimated.
yeah,
I was trying to.
So I guess what Arlen's trying to do, Paula,
Yeah.
is the 256. He has one that says 301,
okay.
whatever. So what does this 256, 880, what is
That was
that
like,
doing?
that's
what scenario was that?
basically a 275 raise for everybody in the 2 Teamster unions and the non-unions. Well,
Okay.
that's not all the non-union, but
But really, as far as that question goes, for the budget purposes,
yeah.
is do we want to codify that within the salaries now,
But
or
you're
just
not-
leave that in contingencies?
Oh,
and
yeah, I
let
would-
it play
right.
out is
I would leave it-
one way we could deal with that.
Yes, which is, because at first I had it in each of the departments. I took it out of the departments which had no effect on the bottom line.
Correct.
I just moved it from each department line item to that contingency line item. So when negotiations are done, we will have to do a budget adjustment, moving that amount of money into the department line items. That's what I thought we could do, but that just sets money aside so that it's there and you don't know what it's going to be until negotiations are done.
I'm in the impression that there's some discussions of doing that in negotiations because of effect and not do the thing now. And we have a little discussion on that. Do we have to negotiate with that group?
But
Not,
We have to negotiate with Teamsters, and you're not gonna do anything until you go to negotiation.
but for it's not Teamsters. Who represents the clerks firm?
Teamsters, it's another Teamster contract.
So, and that's where the majority of the under.
Not necessarily. I mean, they have a number of them, but there's a number in this building. Most of the a good chunk of the employees in this building are under 15. Some of them are in the state's attorney's office. There's a few in,
To your question, do you want to codify that and get it?
Well, I guess I don't see, I don't see a problem with leaving it in contingencies and see where the negotiating,
We don't know what it's gonna be.
don't have no idea what it's gonna be. So I have no problem in leaving it as Paula has done, leaving it contingencies and then we're covered. And that's whatever's negotiated is contained in the budget and we can move forward from there.
Want to get a conclusion.
Right. So
How about?
If that's a consensus.
How are you guys feeling about, the people?
Microphone.
God, I hate it. It is so. Anyway, how do you guys feel about everybody getting that same raise, even if they're 20 or they're $14.50, because that's included in this too, in the contingencies. Is that an issue we want to talk separately? I just had a hard time trying to figure out what our issues were and want to get those clarified.
Well, our issue is we're 500,000 in the hole. That's our issue. We gotta figure out how we're gonna get to a balanced budget. Are we gonna take it out of the capital fund? Are we gonna look at some of these requests and start shaving some of that off of there? I mean, that's really where we're at, I think.
Realistically, Rick, before the transfers, you're 100,000 in the hole.
This year, but that's the problem here
We're
is
just talking about this
You
year.
can't keep doing this year after year without bankrupting.
because, yeah, if we agree to some of this, like adding personnel and things, these things are gonna be here every year. And if we don't have that special one-time money, next year we'll be sitting here and we won't have any well to go to. And then we'll have to be laying off the people that we just hired. So we need to make the hard decisions now and figure out where we're gonna be and how this is gonna affect us long term, excuse me.
And you know, that goes to the question of when you look at our capital reserve, which we've been borrowing from for how many years. So if you think of that as a percentage of what our overall budget is, how many days, what is it, in months, how much reserve does the county need? And that's the biggest question. And in my mind, 6 months, 9 months is not an unreasonable 9 months. I prefer 9 months, but more the better. The more, because that more cushion you have is the ability for us to take the downturns.
And, we haven't ever had, at least since I've been in here, we haven't ever had the discussion is how much money should we be setting aside in capital to repair buildings and replace vehicles and things like that. Every year, we're always on the backside of it, trying to come up with money. Whereas if we are 100,000, I'll just use a number for discussion, 100,000 to the good, every year that goes into the capital fund, that goes towards air conditioning replacement for the, courts building or tuck pointing for the old courthouse, those types of things.
Yep.
We're not doing that.
Properties committee right now is putting together a plan where we'll have a much better grasp of what we need. We've got a 5-year and potentially 10-year depreciation schedule on rooftop units, air conditioning units and all, and that's being worked up as we speak.
Some of that we're hoping to be able to do with IRA.
It's a guessing game, but at least we will have a plan. Much more than we have now. We'll be proactive rather than reactive.
I'd ask Jim this, I think, as you look into that, the figures in here are conservative early, and we have some estimates that are better than this.
On what? On which, Arlen?
income.
On income, projected income? No, I had a conversation with Paul as far as where the projections that they were using for our income budget numbers, and they're using conservative numbers, but at the same time, that's what we want to use as for our projections. So I don't anticipate any adjustments to the forward-looking numbers as we go forward. They're using the right numbers.
So do we need a vote to say we want to put the full amount raises of that in the contingencies? Get something done?
It's already in there.
It's in there as a budget, but it's never been approved.
Well, we haven't approved any of the budget yet. That's what we're here figure out how we're gonna balance our budget.
Yeah, I don't think we need to do a vote on it. We can just do a consensus and then get to the end and as far as voting, what we're going to present to the board in September.
Let me ask you this, as the person putting the budget together for you, do you have a problem with me leaving that in contingency? Does anybody have a problem with it being in contingency? Okay, so then I'll just leave it there because it's one of my highlighted items. Okay, perfect.
Second biggest issue is the sheriff is not here, so we go next.
I don't see him up on the board either.
Let me ask a question to Paula. So on the first capital page that we got here, all these requests, is that total up to be 949 or no? Or is that
Yes.
just the difference between what we started?
No, that's what it. Hold on.
If I'm correct, that figure is in the projected budget.
Yeah,
Yes, they totaled to 949. So the 4 point whatever at the top, the 4.3 minus the 949 gets you to the 3.4 at the bottom, the ending balance.
so how does this tie in to, because you're taking off the beginning capital fund, basically $1 million.
Yes,
But we're 500,000 short in the balanced budget. Where are these at in, I'm trying to figure out.
these are in a completely different fund. They have nothing to do with the
Adam,
general
so-
fund.
So we're $1.5 million basically. If we take
If,
five,
yes, you're gonna spend $1.5 million more.
all
Now,
these plus 500,000 short, we're gonna take $1.5 million out of capital. To balance the budget.
no, because you have, okay, so I guess what's not in this capital anymore is what's gonna be transferred in there. So the 400,000 is gonna be transferred in to that fund, to the capital fund from the general fund.
Okay.
So that's now gonna go up by 400. So you gotta take the 400 off of that.
Would be $1 million short then.
Yes. But I didn't reflect in your capital list the 400,000 coming in there. Sorry, I didn't think about that when I was,
I was just trying to make sure.
yep. No, I get where you're going.
Marilyn, help me if I'm wrong, but the capital fund was established years ago with funds put in from the landfills, isn't that correct? And those, when I got on the board a number of years ago, the plan was that money would be there for capital things like the repairs to the courthouse. More specifically, at that time, they talked about paying for a new jail. And that money was, and of course, now there's no funds going into that because of where we're at the landfill. But that money was never intended for wages, cars. It was capital things like repairing buildings or building a new jail. And every year we work on the budget, it always concerns me that capital fund balance continues to drop. Now, the last few years, we have managed to not use the 400,000 or that we've tried to take out. And I believe it's 400,000 because of the one-time money. But again, we're faced with, will the one-time money, how long will it last? We make decisions like these that are pretty big cost items. I mean, if we don't have one-time money put back in there, we're looking at 4 years and the county is broke in that fund, pay for things, and then you start deciding, what don't you want? Do you not want snowplows running up down the roads? Do you not want deputies? And I think we need to be more conservative. That's just my thought on it, because I've watched this fund as the years I've been on the finance committee continue to drop. And at this time, there's no way to put money back in it because we don't have that revenue. Just a cautious thought, okay?
Question back.
Oh, just a comment, and I'm going to jump in, Mr. Sheelinus, on stuff that we talked about the other day, but there's stuff on here that we can get grants, not ARPA grants, but like the generator at $110,000. Like, I'm working on a generator down in Harmon Township that should fall under FEMA because I need it for a security or for an emergency shelter down in Harmon. we're missing some easy, low hanging fruit on some of these high dollar items, high dollar ticket items that we can still get done without having to drop the whole 110 on and not having to pull ARPA money either. I think that's a huge opportunity where we need to be looking at grants that are out there to help balance our budget more or less.
I agree with you, Chris, but the problem we're faced with now is going forward, you know, until that money comes home and what do we do? What decisions do we make to?
Absolutely, Rick, and looking at it, but you could look at that $110,000 generator and you've got some battery backups that are $6,000 and so on and so forth. The sheriff's department, that's a very big question for you guys to have, but there's a lot of those things on there that I think are low hanging fruit that not necessarily we have to punt on, but we don't have to make a decision on because I think the monies can be coming from somewhere else if we attack it correctly.
Well, I think the question for this committee, I did my mic. Is this capital request okay to go forward, or do we want to look at things that we don't think is necessary with the intent that we're at least going to build the reserve funds by 400,000, which is in there now?
Well, I'd kind of like to go through the general and kind of use capital last because
Okay.
of the way everything flows. I mean, it's just like with patrol deputies. If we don't fund all the sheriff's requests, you know, he's not going to need you know, the additional squads coming
Right.
out of capital. So I think we deal with that first and then we come back to capital and see where we're at.
That's fine as everybody. with that?
You've got your capital budget here and the deputies are being funded out of the capital plan too, along with the squad cars. Does distress me somewhat with that sixth person. This is something the committee has to look at, is 911 is just getting by. At any given time, there's only 2 people. Whole float time. I mean, if they get extremely busy, like last weekend, say at depot days, they had 4 people stationed at depot days and 4 squads out on the road. And only 2 girls work for 911. So you need another floater in there. Hasn't been, they've been cut over the years.
You know, the problem is, John, is that John is, the sheriff is over that department. And
Right.
we specifically asked him if with the 9 people that they have coming on in this budget year, is that going to be sufficient for that department? And the answer was yes. So
Well, and there again, we all have differences of opinion. That's the difference between myself and sheriff. And I think behind me sits the 911 board member. So there's room there to wiggle with. And I think you need that. And if you take a look at what it's going to take penciled in here is $133,000 for new squad cars for these 3 guys. But also on the last page of the sheriff's report that he submitted to us last time we were here, it amounts to another $24,000 piece to equip those cars. $33,000 or $34,000 squad car, but it costs total of $58,000 to equip them, including the car.
So remember that 133 is his normal rotation.
Right, but why not? Well, that should be coming out of his regular budget.
Well, it does, John. So remember what Paula did?
No,
and this
yeah,
was
we
last
pulled it
year.
out of the general fund last year and put it into capital.
Did you?
Yes,
Right.
because it's a
This is-
capital
This
expense.
has been a budget change
The
that,
sheriff is responsible for his own budget.
The hundred-
That falls not.
159,000 is 3 police squads. 3 police.
yeah, those are the 3 new squads
The last
for
three.
further requests.
The other ones are his.
Yeah.
He's adding,
I'm sorry.
if he's
No,
adding
you're fine.
patrol, he needs more cars.
3,000 times 3 for the new deputies.
Correct.
and New squad cars.
Well, that's just for the equip the squads. And then you're right. You still got the equipment and everything for the,
I'm simply saying that, I'm not on finance. Now, then tell you guys what to do. I'm simply saying,
Does
to
a
me, there's a misplaced priority there. That I like boots on the ground, but if you got nobody telling the boots where to go, then you're just spinning your wheels. Simple as that. And I feel that we need to fund
Is it,
person 911 versus maybe an additional deputy.
is it the will of the committee to leave the capital list as it is and come back to it after we go through operations?
That's where I'd like.
Okay, so that's what we'll do. So how do we go through operations? Any suggestions? There's.
Mr. Humphrey is contemplating.
I'll just wait till it comes up.
Well,
mean,
I think from the conversation that we had with the sheriff's presentation and Chief Deputy Glessner's, you know, your line of questioning, Rick, was in regards to, as according to the study that the sheriff and the information the sheriff provided for us, there's the question of whether or not is he truly fully staffed for the requirement of 3 and 2. I guess that's what it comes down to.
Well, I think part of the request, I think, my understanding, he wants to go to 3 and 4, 3 during the day, 4 at night, currently at 2 and 3. I mean, I don't know what the answer is. I guess that's for everybody to decide. But under the current 2 and 3, my calculations says 10 full-time people would cover the shifts availability, with 4 to fill in for sick time, off time, vacation time, whatever. So I guess the question is do we want to put more staffing in place, or do we feel adequate with what we have? And unfortunately, the sheriff's not here, so.
I think we kind of agreed to not do the sheriff's budget till we can talk to sheriff again. So the question is, are we going to go on to the other parts of the budget and before, well, we do the sheriff's thing? I mean, I think we've done a good job, and Paul has done an excellent job of giving us information to make decisions on. But the question is, we're not making decisions. We're pushing it off to the future.
All right, I'll go specifically then. On page 3 at the top, insurance, all of the insurance, is that, what's that? What goes into the insurance line? Is that the actual premium? It went from 252 to 300,000.
Is this,
Oh, are you talking at the top there?
Yeah.
Okay.
That is the differential cost
Mean what?
between the high deductible that our insurance plan does and the low deductible that we offer to our employees.
Okay, so I think during conversation, we all were trying to figure out at what point in time it was decided that the county would make up the difference in the deductible. Is that correct?
Yeah, so all the changes, hopefully we're gonna have some changes within the cost structure of our health insurance for the county. But nothing's gonna change this fiscal year, this budget year that we're dealing with. Mainly because we're past, or we're going to be, I think, September 1st is the, Wendy, correct? Yeah, when September 1st is the deadline, and there's a whole bunch of hoops that we have to go through to notify our carriers and our pool that we are looking for different solutions. I think this next year is going to be a year of doing a lot of background work and preparation for looking forward and trying to get a better handle on what the county's costs are and the employees.
Yeah, well, I guess my question is more to in-house. At some point in time, our deductible has increased from a previous plan to what we're currently under. Marilyn's got a hand in the air.
Marilyn?
I'll give you a little history on this. When were insured with Blue Cross Blue Shield through Lohman and Companies down at the Quad Cities, we had initially a $500 deductible And then, the premium cost for that was outrageous. Todd Lohman suggested that we go to a higher deductible plan and the county somebody pick up the difference. It wasn't specifically to be the county. What happened was we created an insurance fund. That insurance fund, all contributions from the employees went into that fund. The premium that we used for the employees had a component that was added onto it more than the Blue Cross Blue Shield premium.
Cover that difference
Cover
in the
that difference.
deductible.
Everything went into that fund. The extra money for the high deductible, those payments from Envision, came out of that fund. So at that point, the employees were paying 25% of that extra cost. The insurance committee at that time agreed to the plan. It was a great savings over buying the lower deductible plan. And then as things transpired, people said, oh, we don't need that insurance fund. And it kind of went to the wayside. And then we went with this IPBC, which really messed things up because they didn't have the same plan. They said it was the same plan, but it wasn't. And so it's evolved into a big mess. But that's how it initially started.
Well, I guess the bottom line is we're currently at 6,000 for deductible.
I don't remember, but yeah, something like
And the
that.
county's picking up everything over what amount?
No, it's layered. So you have the 6,000 deductible that you're talking about is the Blue Cross Blue Shield deductible. So think of that as your excess coverage, Rick. So Blue Cross Blue Shield doesn't pay a thing until we hit that $6,000 deductible. Okay.
Yeah.
So that takes care of that. But then there's the Q-chip, which is the PPBC. The Q-chip is the pool that we're currently involved in. And then they cover from between $1,400, the $1,400 deductible, and which is theirs, up to the $6,000 deductible for Blue Cross Blue Shield. And Wendy, if I'm saying anything wrong, jump at me. And then what the county and Envision picks up is the $500 deductible up to the 14. Am I getting that right?
Actually, I understood it, Jim, to add confusion to this, that anything between the gap of 6,000 and the 500, the county is picking up through this Envision administrative process. So I didn't understand.
That's what I'm thinking.
So the first $500 is the employees and all the employees. From 500 to 1,400, then there's a prorated piece that's the employees and technically Lee County, because we agreed to pick that up, until you get to $1,400. And then everything between 1,400 and 6,000 is still being paid by Lee County through the Envision administrative process. And as Jim said, Blue Cross Blue Shield doesn't pick up anything till we reach 6,000. So there is a multi-layered approach.
So my question is, are we required to anywhere make up that difference? Because it sounds to me like it's just to keep the premiums low over the course of time. We've agreed to just keep continuing to pick up this deductible. Are we at a point in time where we can't afford to do that anymore?
Rick, you're probably not going to like the answer, but I think we are obligated to it because it was the insurance plan that was approved by the insurance committee and ultimately by the board back then. So we're committed to it right now to make a change that through the FOP contract. The FOP contract requires that you have an insurance committee that is including board members and staff or employees. And those employees and board members on that insurance committee make that recommendation, and then it ultimately goes up the food chain to you at finance and then ultimately to the full board. So that was approved that way years ago. So to change that, we have to, as Jim suggested, go back to the drawing board and come up with a program that we think will be the best economically feasible program we can. And then it has to work its way through the food chain again. And Marilyn has her hand up again.
I don't know if this will clarify things or muddy the waters worse, but that 1,400 is not a deductible. That's the maximum out of
Oh, that's
pocket.
right. You're right.
Yes, Paul just reminded me of that too. He said,
I am a perfect example of that as of January.
yes. So I did misstate that. 1,400 is the maximum out of pocket for the employee.
Right.
So we're picking up between 1,400 and 6,000. Am I understanding that correctly?
Correct.
And a portion of that between the 500 and the 1,400, because and I don't remember the percentages. It's 70-30 or 80-20.
I wanted to say 20-80.
Yeah.
80,
Somewhere in
20.
there. So we're picking up a portion of that also, I believe.
Well, we can't be picking up, well, we're picking up the deductible, but as far as with the cost the cost for coverage or the bills, that gets, we pay that deductible portion and then the rest of the bill is to the pool, and that carries on. I don't think, and that's 100% rate. Cause I asked the question, back with Cindy, whether there was an 80-20 there, and that's picked up 100%. So anyway,
The bottom line is that we're not in a position to be able to do anything in this budget year, but it's on the radar and we are going to be working through a process that hopefully will add clarity to the process and make sure that, you know, we've got an economically feasible program and hopefully simplified.
and also the numbers that we've got plugged in here are going to cover us for any, because I think part of the heartburn here was the increase in dollars that were going to the pool. And we gotta make sure that our budget covers that.
And administrative costs for, you know, taking care of managing that.
And I think at the last insurance meeting, we had that motion that they bring forward to the full board, wasn't it? And then we.
That was the change because we had a conflicting plan with IRS rules. So
So is the recommendation that we look at that again next year, is that what we're saying, and not do anything this year?
well, I think the insurance company will eventually be looking, having a full good understanding of what the county's costs are and how we can improve structure and reduce administrative costs going forward.
So for Rick's question, we're not going to do anything on the budget with that this year.
Well, I'll ask Paula, I guess more specifically then, I mean, it's just 50,000 or 48,000, but do we believe we need a $48,000 increase in 2022 budget over and above what we have in 21?
I think I was looking at that because that's kind of where we're tracking. So you can see, oh, well, actually,
We're at 220 year to date.
yeah, 220 is the year to date so far. We still have 3 months left of the year. So I think that's why up to 300, it might not be. I mean, I can knock
I'm just looking for
10,
whatever,
15,000 off. Yeah,
a
probably
little
good.
bit if we can, but you don't want to sell yourself short either.
I come up with 295 if I just annualize it. Want me to knock 5 off?
Sure.
Okay.
So are we ready to move on?
So we're changing that from 300, we're changing that
200.
to 295.
Yes, we just found 5,000.
What do we want to go to next, gentlemen?
Probably just go down page by page, see if there's anything
Okay.
that jumps off the radar at us and discuss it and talk about it.
So if you want to do
I-
that, there is something that if you want to do it that way, I wasn't sure how we were going to proceed today. I'm going to go to page.
While Jim's looking, one thing that we talked about, and I don't know if Paul or anybody else has given any more thought about the reimbursement from lots for janitorial staff and things like that, IT, things that we provide out there, if we've made any adjustments that way.
So Rick, that actually got handed off to me and I did make contact with Greg. And Greg was reviewing the grants themselves to find out what would be eligible and what he could do. And he was supposedly still working on that. So I don't think I have a final answer for you on that. But I can follow up with him and see where that was at. The last time you guys met, he was on vacation. So it kind of got delayed until he got back from vacation, and then I haven't heard from him. So my fault. I'll follow up with him.
Okay, so I think to follow up, and that's where I was going. County board under the grant stipend, that went from 5,000 to 7,500. I did have a request from Chris Norberg, Administrative Services, and he'd like to see that be adjusted. So Chris, do you want to explain what you're thinking there?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of low hanging fruit out there. I've had conversations with plenty of people to the point like the generator there, things that are capital improvements that we're able to go and get. Your 5,000, 7,500, you're not in the ballpark of what a grant writer is. There's different contracts out there, and I know without naming names, the current person makes 20K. So going and trying to hire somebody for 7,500 is, you're just not going to get it done. But if we want to make the opportunity to go after 1.2 to $3.5 million every year, and that's what's really out there. Like I said, the FEMA would pay for the generator. It's what comes first, the horse or the carriage, horse or the cart. And at a certain point, do we have to kind of buck up and try to go after some of this money? If there's somebody else locally who wants to do it, somebody else in the department, Paula, you want to write grants? Probably not. I can answer that for her. Yeah, she just laser eyed me looking across the room, but there's, we got to do something.
Just something to keep in mind, writing grants is not the issue. It's administering those grants and doing the reporting afterwards. And if you're going to increase your grant writing and you're going to have to increase somebody who's going to take care of them when they get here.
Yeah.
Because that's the harder job. Compliance and reporting is a harder job. It's harder than writing grants.
So
Ask anybody who has to deal with them.
So your 7,500 that you've got budgeted there, it's just not feasible. To put it, Dixon last year got about just under $4 million in grants written by Greg. How's that do to your budget? It's still one-time money, but until the state dries up, it's still one-time money, but
That's a different kind of one-time money.
that's big time one-time money.
Specific items, it's not.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. So
And wasn't that in regards to the salvage yard and cleaning that up? They've been working on that for about.
yeah, so Dixon, I meet with Langloss about once a month. Dixon piggybacked on something that you guys did 10 years ago for a trail system through Lee County. No idea, you guys passed something, never did anything with it. Langloss found it. They went and used it. Greg was able to put together a grant, and total for this riverfront with the grant that they've gotten, I believe it's like $3.3 million is what they've gotten to develop this riverfront from low hanging fruit that this board passed 12 years ago. As we look at like this UTV ordinance, there's going to be, because we're so on the cutting edge of counties doing that, there's going to be programs out there that I can foresee being like, hey, let's develop trail systems through Lee County. That just improves now it's not fixing a building, right? But anytime we can bring extra revenue or extra people to Lee County to go buy gas, buy food, they're little things. So.
Don,
Yeah, Chris, I can't speak to what's happened, and Paula probably better can. But that riverfront money came mainly through the Federal Highway Administration way back in the day. And I think it was 1.4 or something like that.
I'm not sure, but I think they got it through
Because I
Denny
was-
Hastert, actually.
Quite frankly. But with that said, have you had a chance to chat with the chairman on this $7,500?
Have I talked to the chairman? Absolutely.
Well, that was agreed.
I talk to Bob every day.
That was an agreed upon price. That's why it was put into the budget as such.
I don't
Grant-
disagree that it's agreed upon price, but I think it's like trying to go. It's trying to go hire a doctorate degree, somebody with a doctorate degree for $50,000. You're just not going to get it done.
I'm just saying that the individual we discussed as far as doing the grant writing came across at $6,000. And I don't know what we've used him for since that time, but that was after I exited as chairman. But that was the price that was agreed upon. He's the one doing the work for Dixon. And he said he would do that for $6,000 for the county, depending on what it was.
I got his
But as
contract.
Paul-
I got his contract with Dixon. It's $20K.
Jim,
So
I think we need to move on, but I got, just so people
making 20
know,
right now for Dixon.
is this it? Is that 200,000 or whatever in this
I'm
budget?
not gonna sit here and banter back and forth with you, Chris. I'm
20,000.
simply saying that I know what figure
Chris,
it was.
hey, you guys take it outside. We're trying to talk here.
This was what we were asked to do, Rick,
Now, we're here to discuss the budget.
and that's what he
You
was
guys are
doing.
going back
I
and
was
forth
counting.
about a
So I'll
position,
be quiet.
so that's fine. Thank
Don't
you.
want my input, don't ask.
In response to my question, is 20,000 in this budget?
It is not. So it's 7,500. So Mr. Norberg would like to see that be raised up to 20,000.
Okay, do we want to deal with that or move on?
I guess, is this a full-time position or a part-time position or contractual position, or what are we talking?
Discuss it. You don't want my.
Go ahead.
Depending on who you hire, it's going to be an increase to their salary, because if you're talking about Greg, it's going through payroll. So
I don't know who we're talking about. Is this a I
Rick
mean,
Gates, the one who agreed to do the writing for us. As I say, it was an agreed upon price. Nothing's been done on it since that I know of.
but the person who Dixon pays is Greg Gates. But if you're gonna hire specifically him, it's gonna be through payroll, not a contractual amount, just FYI.
isn't he a current employee?
Yeah, and there's some stuff that that we have to discuss. I'm not saying it has to be Greg even, but I know that there are people out there. I had a conversation with Mr. Sheline. He's got connections that we can go and interview other people, but I feel like if we're gonna do it, at least make a wholehearted effort in trying to get somebody good rather than.
So one of the things that Chris is referring to, and that's conversations I've had with Jason Anderson and what Jason's done with Redco and whatnot over there. And we know we have a request that's going to come through Redco in regards to that overpass and the bypass around Stewart. Now, that's going to be considerable costs. And what Jason does is he hires grant writers. He just doesn't have a grant writer on staff. He has certain grant writers that he goes to for specific items. You know, he has a grant writer that he goes to for railroad projects that are very well versed in how to write grants and understand how railroad stuff works. Then he has a guy up in Rockford that is more of a transportation, a broader grant writer. So he uses specific people for specific things. I guess I guess I would argue for the increase for the grant writer line item. How we utilize that, I think, can come through the process. But I do agree with Mr. Norberg from the aspect is that, especially in the world we're living in today, whether you like it or not, there's money out there to be had. And the county should be utilizing resources to get that those dollars when they're appropriate and when they're available to us. And the only way you can do that is you have consultants and you have grant writers to be able to do that. And also, and I agree completely with the treasurer's comment in regards to then you have to have the understanding of what it takes to administer the grants after you get them. But I would go along with the increase of 20,000 and so it's there in the budget so that we're not coming back and circling back and trying to put something in when an opportunity arises. I think it needs to be there.
That was one of the things we looked at for our first administrator, that she was a grant writer. And so it was an administrative function, and we thought that would be handled from that. I don't know what was put in with Wendy's. Cause I used to write grants and it's almost patent, but it's what you're eligible for and whatever. If you take it on a pure grant basis, we just got a grant for $400,000, but everybody in the world got that one. So it's when you go to specific, and he has written a lot of grants. The gentleman we're talking about, but I think, Ms. Norberg, did that pass your committee and go to exec and all that?
The grant portion, no, this came up last week in conversation that I was out having, and then I called Jim, I can't.
So I
remember
would
which-
suggest that it goes through the normal protocol.
Well, this is actually would be normal protocol, Mr. Chairman, because the request is being put in to increase that line item for a grant writer in the budget. And then we can say yes or no to it and move on. So I'm just suggesting that we put 20,000 in, whoever that or how that's administered, the money's there, and then Mr. Norberg's committee or whoever, the finance committee can
So
choose
where
to
does
spend
that-
that or not, but at least it's in the budget.
Where does that get assigned to then?
I would imagine Mr. Norberg has taken that bull by the horn, so I guess his committee could run it through on.
So do you get a check or money order?
I'll take both either way. I believe it should go through executive or finance personally.
So my question.
Not trying to, oh, sorry, Rick, go ahead.
Well, my question is, I guess, we got 7,500 in here, but we're wanting to up it to 20,000, and that's based on what, Chris?
Research that I've done with what the fair market price is, right?
For what though? I mean, is it a per hour basis or per grant, or what are you basing it off?
They're
of?
on a retainer. He's on a retainer currently.
And is it, you're talking about Greg?
Normally on federal grants, the writer can include himself in that grant, so you don't need to pay it outside normally. Because the grant does have an administrative fee on it, generally.
Absolutely. And so part of it is, and I get your frustration, and I'm not even saying it's that Greg's the right person. I'm just saying that if you want to play in the big boy sandbox, you got to bring big boy money. That's kind of how it goes. That if we're going to go and show up with $7,500, we've had $5,000 in there, what, last year, 2 years, Jim? We want to put 7,500 and we haven't used it at all because I don't know if anybody's wanted to take the bull by the horns and do it, which I'm more than happy to. Or if it's just not enough to go and get anything done.
So we've had 7,500 in there to use, but yet nobody's utilized it. Why are we increasing it? Just because we're gonna throw more money at it?
If I'm gonna go into a fight.
No,
No.
I'm
If
asking a
you're
question
gonna go into a
because
conversation.
you're telling me that we've had 7,500 sitting there to give to somebody to write a grant, but nobody's taken the 7,500, but yet now we're gonna increase it. I can't get behind that. I mean, if we've used it and we're short every year, that's one thing, but to have it there, and nobody's used it, now we want to throw more money at it, I'm out.
Chris, are you telling us that nobody has done this and you're willing to do it? I mean, let me first say, I believe that grant writers are worth their weight in gold. The people that do it do a marvelous job. But then cautiously, let me ask this, are you willing to be the guy who makes sure we get somebody and does it?
If that's what it takes to get something done, absolutely.
I mean, to Rick's point, we haven't used the money, so we haven't even attempted.
Exactly.
And then the other problem with grants is the gentleman you've referenced has done a remarkable job, but at least for his employer, he's looking for grants that enhance them. Who's going to look for the grants that we're going to want to go after? Do we expect him to do it in this, whoever we hire? Do we expect them to do it in this salary?
That's in my perfect world, theoretically what it would be. You find the person who, we don't have to have the Jason Anderson approach where we have specialized people. We're not to that level right now and we're not writing current grants. Let's just go get the low hanging fruit. And so, yes, there's websites out there that they can go and look for different grants that are available. So I think you put somebody on retainer, and as they see something that may come, that may make our fit, they can be in communication with myself, they can be in communication with Wendy. I think Wendy, like, I'm happy to take the lead, but I think the administrator can have a large say in that too.
Well, and I agree. I mean,
And
that
so-
wasn't part of, I don't believe that was part of the
Marilyn,
job
then
description, was it, when Wendy was
I-
hired, but
I'm
we need
I'm not
somebody.
totally recalling the whole scenario on this, but there was some sort of portal to view all grants that was available to the county. And we needed one person assigned to look at this and have access, and Greg was given that responsibility.
Right, and we pay some to local economic development, we pay some to the regional, where work before was in budgets. I think the only thing we can do on this now, do we want to make a motion to include it in the budget and see if it goes up and down?
I can do that. I'm thinking, I guess I want to caution the committee. I'm not thinking about a particular person. I'm thinking about what we could potentially be asked to do, especially in regards to over east. It's going to be fairly critical that we have a participation in the efforts going on over east. There's a huge amount of growth potential for the county. That could be a huge income driver and economic driver for us, in getting that project done. And we're going to be required to have some skin in the game. And I want to make sure, I agree, direction that Chris started with, as I thought about what was coming forward. I mean, it's bigger than what we've been talking about. There's some other components, and maybe 20,000 isn't even enough. I'm not sure.
So, and that's where I was gonna go here. I mean, I agree with what you're saying, Jim. If that happens,
But
shame on us if we can't find $13,000 in our budget. I just have a hard time putting it in there just for whatever, especially when we're looking at a $500,000 hole.
Can I-
mean, to me, in the grand scheme of things, if something comes to play where we really need this money, I'm sure we could find it and come and
But
support
then
it.
we always complain about
I
finding
understand,
things ad
but-
hoc. I'd rather have it in
but that's
now,
what-
because I know.
I agree what
we-
you're saying.
We know what's coming, right? We do know
Well,
pretty much what's coming. Maybe not all the cost associated, but we know that that's,
and like I said, it might be 50,000, so we'll be right back here doing the same
yeah,
thing.
yeah. And I get it.
Go ahead.
Mike Copine, I know you don't recognize me, okay? I had a brain lapse here. The state's attorney, if I remember right, has two people that are associated or connected with writing grants. Is there any potential there that we could discuss? I mean, just, there's a lot of different options that you can enter into as far as getting somebody to write grants. We got a guy down in Amboy that just acquired 2 grants, one of them over $110,000.
Let me do this. If we want to do it, we'll bring it up later, because we've got $1 million of things in this budget that we haven't made decisions on. And then we're spending all our time talking about a $20,000 grant. Not that it doesn't have merit, but we need to get back to our original business of making some conclusions.
So bring certainty to it, Mr. Chairman, if you want me. I'll make the motion that we adjust that line item from 7,500 to 20,000, and we'll see where it goes. I make that motion.
Anybody want to second that?
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, let's do a roll call.
Arlen McLean,
No.
Jim Sheeline,
Yes.
Doug Farster,
No.
Tom Kitson,
Yes.
Rick Humphrey.
No.
Okay. Are we to everything that we've had so far? Because we're on the last page, and what do we want to do next? I'm just trying to get some conclusions, guys.
Paula, on the sheriff's salary or salary line item number, page 4, you've got highlighted part-time 196 versus 144. What was that increase again? Remember?
Let me get to the right place.
And the overtime's just, I think, annualizing.
So the reason I highlighted those was because those are things that are affected by your decisions on page one, whether or not you're adding. So this is what he's requested. What's highlighted under the sheriff on page 4 is what he's requested.
But if
Those
we don't
would
approve-
change if you approve some things if you approve some things on page 1, those would change. That's the only reason why I highlighted them.
So does that 300,000, Paula, and I'm glad you grabbed that, Rick, that 300,000, does that reflect the reduction in overtime in regards to the extra positions?
The 300,000, you mean the,
Timeline on-
oh, the 300,000 that's in there does not reflect any changes yet. I put those changes up on page 1 to put them all in one spot. So the 300,000 is what he's requested. So that would change by the numbers on page 1 if you actually approve those. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
So
Oh, I'm sorry, it's page 2, not page 1.
But we want to proceed talking about that, even with the sheriff, and if he wants to present something later.
So, and I guess, so the sheriff had in his proposal, if you remember, he had a $30,000 reduction for every position. And, you know, if the sheriff is able to do that, that's great and wonderful. I, you know, from the history that I've looked at, that hasn't really flowed. And I thought a more conservative approach was to give $10,000 per new employee to the reduction of the overtime. So having going that direction, that number, that 300,000 would now, and correct me if I'm wrong, Paula, that should actually reduce. If we would, according to that formula, we'd reduce that line item from 300 down to 250.
Correct.
Okay. You guys follow that
And
logic?
I understand your logic. The tough pill to swallow there is that you're adding 70,000 onto the salary line to save 10,000 of overtime.
Agreed. I'm making no comment in regards to the number of positions.
Yeah.
I'm simply wanting you guys to understand how that's flowing through the numbers.
Realistically, and at least the last 3 years I'm aware of, we've had something in the sheriff's budget of reducing overtime. It's never happened.
That was the history I was referring to.
Well, it just never happened. Can we make, if we were gonna do something on that, and this is just for discussion, can we make it contingent? For example, if you added 3 staff, the assumption is that he's gonna add another one to the down county, so we'd have 3 people on if everybody's working that day or just covering the overtime. You're not gonna be able to hire those guys because you got class and whatever. It's gonna be mid-year before you can spend half that, except in overtime. I mean, so we want to even consider that is it our discussion that we feel safer if we have a 3rd person on duty down county and another jailer? I mean, there's a line item that he did propose, and I thought he did an excellent position paper. It says you go with what you got in budget. So if my assumption, if you did number 1, which was giving 3 positions, whatever, subject to the only way he keeps them is he's able to reduce overtime. And we're
Well,
not,
that was kind of the direction I was kind of hoping the committee would go, and I would make the argument from the information that I had gathered, the 2 correction officers additional seems to be pretty clear that's necessary for the safety of the officers and the scheduling difficulties there and then the additional patrol. So it'd be 2 corrections, 1 patrol, and I could get behind that.
according to Rick's thing, trying to find out how many people you need to have. If you added 3 positions and it's specifically for overtime, you're not adding another officer down county or another officer to that, because that's just gonna increase the amount of overtime with the mandations. So I would have that specifically for what he's saying, requesting overtime. I don't know if we want to increase positions based on the assumptions that we need 3 people down county. I don't know why. And just do the thing on overtime. And if he's successful, he keeps them. He doesn't. And that's just an idea. So it's not something I worked out. Go ahead.
Mr. McLean, I have a question for all of you there. I've looked at the requests. I've looked at the last page of the data that was sent in. And there's one position that is just kind of drifted away in the clouds. My question to all of you is, if you increase the number of people that are going to be on the road, who's going to take care of all of those people at the 911 center when and if an emergency comes up? At the current time, the way some of the staffing is unfolding at 911, there can be some issues. Example, this weekend, as I understand it, 4 officers from the sheriff's department were assigned to work depot days weekend. The original standard shift was also working. Fortunately, the director was able to get a 3rd person to help fill in, but if they didn't have that, are 2 dispatchers going to be able to handle traffic with 8 people out there, not to mention the other small communities that are there? The reason for my question is to ask you to give consideration of how those calls in an emergency situation is going to be handled if there are only 2 people working that dispatch board down there.
I worked in behalf of the Rick on negotiating the 911 with that. And in fact, they did then have relief built in their budget, the 911 people. So they have positioned down from that. I mean, it gets to be time they can do some stuff, but they did backups with the city of handling the calls, the things like that. So there was a procedure at one time.
As far as dispatch, you mean?
Dispatch and I don't know.
That's a question that the director, Arlen, would probably have to answer. I don't know all the particular details on it.
They at that time had the positions in relief. Because they had the 2 people on and you could do it with 1 unless I mean, if you have like a hurricane like they had down there, you need 7, but it was.
My understanding, they haven't had an increase since 1996.
They've done backups with the city and done backups with police before, but that's a real rare circumstances. And that's old data. This is at least 3 years ago.
Mike, you make a very good point and very aware of your point. But keep in mind, we were proposed 6 positions. And when the sheriff walked in to meet with us, he immediately removed that position himself. That's not something we did. We had no say in it. He removed it before he started negotiating with us, the positions. You make a very good point, very valid point. We were not aware of any of that. So to ask us about it, he withdrew that position immediately.
Was there any offer of any information that justified removing that position?
The only
And
thing I remember is.
I apologize. I'm not here to.
No, you're fine.
To
but
debate
I
that.
just want to clarify that we,
Well, my memory of that conversation was that the sheriff made the argument that 911 with people that were coming back from disability and whatnot, that they were fully staffed. That was
Off on long-term disability.
that
or
was the
something.
communication from the sheriff to this.
you know, to
committee.
have a position.
And that is true.
Cause us to ask questions because.
Things on the outside of that office continue to grow and continue to get added to. You're adding more responsibilities to the people that are down there in that 911 dispatch.
Yeah.
We answer that dispatch down there answers the calls for Dixon Police Department. So where are you going to get your backup?
And Mike, I don't know that I'm in a position because I don't have enough information. I'm not there. You know, you've got the luxury of being on the board and stuff like that. But when you've got the people in charge of it telling us that they're full staffed, who are we to question that they're not, I guess is the position that we're in.
Yeah.
And we're not trying to make that decision. I mean, we just got to try to fund it if, you know.
And, quite honestly, when somebody says, I can get by without this, we're not looking to spend money we don't have, so there's no point arguing. I mean, he just came in and said, he more or less withdrew that position and never discussed it. He never presented it other than in the written format to us prior. And then pulled it when he came to present to us.
Mike, it was my understanding also that we had more money into 911 than anybody in by our salary survey that we had done by a labor attorney. Secondarily, it seems there's been some combinations and reduction in staff when you have cities like Sterling, Rock Falls combine and had some less people because it's all wireless or whatever. So I don't think we're in a position to do that. He didn't ask for any more, but you're under the impression that they're one position down from where they were last year.
I'm not going to sit here, Arlen, and drag this out and try to explain, all the details, because honestly, I don't know all the details.
Right. And I don't.
I'm just
either.
going to relate the operation of the county from 1996, okay? Do we have the funds that we had back in 1996? Do we have the people that we had back in 1996? No, we don't. There's been increases there because of the need on the outside.
Right. And
Saying that there's a need there, and I'm not talking against the county, please understand that. If we don't have enough, I'm bringing it up now, we need to ask the director some specific questions. Where are you at with dispatch? How many people do you need? Why do you need it? It was placed in the line item there at, I think, around $50-some thousand, and then just on a comment, and I'm not trying to criticize the sheriff. I'm trying to respond on a legitimate situation here. You increase the outside and don't do anything on the inside, it's not going to function the way it should. Somebody's going to get hurt. And on a public safety issue, that's a concern for me.
So what we've done so far this morning is nothing.
Is, well,
Well,
and understand where we're at,
Well,
Mike.
I apologize that I fall in that category, that we've done nothing. But if this slips through the crack, you are hurting the 911.
so my suggestion is let's take a 10-minute break so I can go to the bathroom. And come back at 10:30 and let's see if we can attack something.
So
Well.
I see that sign. Yeah. Oh. How long do you eat?
Oh, they're hanging 2 weeks.
Are they? Some, yeah.
Mr. Kitson,
Yep, about 3 days here, was round the clock negotiating. And
do we have to do anything to reconvene? Okay. Let me give a summary, even though people aren't paying attention. It's my understanding that so far we really haven't made a lot of decisions.
No.
Yeah,
No, we
surprising.
haven't.
But I'm under the impression with Paula's work and whatever, that we have enough in budget to make a decisions on the sheriff and everything else that's done on it. And I think we have to get someplace to make a decision. So discussions from you guys, how do we get there? I mean, I can't shoot anybody, but
So I had said what I could get behind in regards to the extra positions the sheriff could.
okay.
You know, and I could get behind 2 additional corrections and one patrol. That's kind of.
Say that again, please.
Nope. Good thing that was almost empty. So what I could get behind is 2 corrections and 1 patrol. So I guess I would throw that out there and we can discuss that.
Well, and unfortunately, once again,
I can't hear anything.
Get, come on, you guys.
You can't hear us.
so
Sit down.
I just don't know. I wish the sheriff was here because, I mean, I would definitely want to try to make sure we're fully staffed and everything, but without having any more information, I guess my concern is what are these positions going to do? Again, my main question was the last time is my calculations on the road patrol, if we didn't add any additional headcount, where's all the overtime coming in? And by adding this person, we definitely need to see a reduction in overtime. You know, do we look at adding 2 patrol deputies and only 1 corrections? Because in my conversation with him, the patrol people can come into corrections, but the corrections can't go out to patrol. So if we're adding headcount to be diversified and be able to take them and use them where you need them, is probably the route I would rather see us go. And even if it means if we're going to do 3 patrol deputies and forget the corrections and then be able to roll them into corrections so that you don't have just extra personnel sitting around.
The cross training.
I think you make very valid points. I wanted to throw something out. We're stuck and we needed to have a discussion point, and I think you make very valid points, Rick.
Go ahead.
Can I just ask, that's why I was over asking Paula, anybody contact the sheriff? Does he know this meeting?
He contacted Jim.
Yeah, he had emailed me late on Friday and asked to be here. I was tied up over the weekend. I didn't get back to him. I called him this morning as I was coming in early to the meeting and he's tied up.
Okay, just
He
curious.
didn't
I wanted to
answer.
make sure
I
that
did
we're
reach out to the
spinning our
sheriff this
wheels,
morning.
what Rick's
Right.
saying.
So-
Curious if
Tom,
somehow fell through the cracks.
Okay, I wasn't at the last meeting. You guys were, we had met with him. I guess I'm still concerned with how we're off so far on the count of how many people we need at the jail. We've already added people. We were told we'd run with what we had. I understand the concern of welfare for the people, but are we worse today than we were before on them being off? What's going to happen with these people if nobody's off and everybody's here? Do we have extra people with nothing to do? Did anything get brought up? I guess that's what I'm asking is, did we have a reference to that?
do you guys want to add a contingency? Because what I thought about it was same thing, 3 positions, how you went across. But I'd want to make it contingent that if he knows that if we aren't able to reduce overtime, they're not going to stay. And he'll have to go back to the position he has in his budget that says you do what you have the money for. Because he wrote 5 things that were how you can come up with staffing patterns. You know, in his report, if you guys want to pull that back and whatever, but I think we got to make a decision. My understanding at this point in time, based on the best information that we've been able to get, we have enough income to have a balanced budget, even though we should and still move about $1 million to capital because of the IRA grants and everything else. We don't have any. I thought you were talking to Judge Vale, the way you looked up there. So it's not a money issue, what we can or cannot do, but I'd like to make it contingent that he has to see some reduction over time and doesn't increase the staffing pattern as such.
But how do we do that, Arlen? If you hire somebody on and I don't know how, once
But
you
if he-
hire somebody, they're
If he
there.
doesn't have a good reduction over time with the 3 positions, he loses them next year. And we go back to what he can afford. I don't,
Well,
that's just,
that's awful.
Well, and the other part of this, adding this, I mean, there was a request for everybody to get a car. I mean, I don't know why we can't utilize our fleet a little bit more efficiently. I understand maybe there's some people that maybe live a little further away, but
Well, you know, when that question was asked, the sheriff had made the comment that everyone takes a car home.
I get that, but
Is that a county policy? Is that a requirement? How that was my question. It was how does that work?
I don't know how it works. But I don't know that we can continue to maintain that policy if that's the case.
Now, that's kind of where I was at.
so at this point, there was a suggestion and a modification to the suggestion. We're gonna make a decision for him to counter if he wants to or whatever.
Well, it would be nice to have a further conversation with the sheriff before the full committee.
So tentatively with no, I'm just
I
trying
mean,
to get
would
this.
Is that where you guys are?
Yeah, and I was honestly asking a question. Did any of that get discussed in that meeting of what happens if they're all there?
So,
Well, that's where I was with the cross training about being able to
Yes.
put them on the road deputies, or he said that the personnel that is corrections only are not qualified or can't go out on the road, but the road deputies could go into corrections.
Right.
And so that's why I'm saying, if we are gonna approve additional headcount, they all need to be patrol deputies, cross-trained to be able to go into corrections. So when they're not on the road, they can be utilized.
I agree.
So with the minutes
that
reflect,
makes, I hadn't even thought of that
And,
point, Rick. That was a good point.
will the minutes reflect that we're thinking 3 positions, how they're allocated, but we'd like to see how you'd staff, and we're expecting a reduction in overtime, not that I'm gonna try. We're gonna have a reduction in overtime, or we re-look at those positions next year. I just want to do something.
Well, I mean, I think we can move forward here if that's the consensus and put that all in contingencies. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's approved yet. The money is set aside for further discussion.
That's a good idea. So we'll defer another decision to contingencies.
I'm just saying is that I don't know if anybody feels real comfortable about making that decision with the information we have.
So are you suggesting 1 in corrections and 2 deputies?
No,
or
I'm suggesting all
all 3
deputies.
Okay.
So are you also suggesting?
If we're gonna go, I'm just saying if we're hiring any,
Yeah,
all
no,
deputies.
Yeah, okay.
That's all I'm.
Just to get clarity, are we saying that we want 3 road deputies all the time? That's what he was, I don't know, was he
Well,
saying?
I don't think we're saying that.
I believe that ought to be up to his staffing. That ought to be up to the sheriff. We're just looking at the budget numbers, where he wants to use them. As far as I'm concerned, he's in charge of his
And
own staff.
if we're gonna propose getting road deputies that are cross-trained, then he won't always have 3 unless his overtime budget goes out the roof, because he'll be moving them over to be in the jail.
Correction.
Corrections in the jail, and be paying all kinds of overtime for deputies.
So we had in a contingency of, do we need to see reduction in overtime? Will it be reconsidered? I mean,
Yeah, we gotta be some way. We have never, ever, back to Maryland knows, we've never been able to tie down that budget for overtime.
Mr. Norberg, you had a comment? You had your hand up? No?
I don't know how you're ever gonna tie it down. You can say you've got a contingency, the sheriff's got control of the overtime, and if you put a limit on it, he'll go over.
Well, we can reduce the overtime
problem.
budget by
Put
100,000.
that on the board. Will continue to be a problem.
Well, the money's not spent. If the money's not there, we can't continue to spend when you
Right.
don't have it.
No,
So
I agree.
if
but-
you don't have it, I guess you gotta start laying.
Well,
people
what
off. I
happens
mean, I
is,
don't know.
just like any other department head, if the department head has to spend money, they have to come back before the finance committee and ask for a budget adjustment. That's what would have to happen. The sheriff would, you reduce his overtime line item. If he knows that's gonna be overspent, at that point, he'd have to come before the finance committee and ask for a budget adjustment, and we'd have to take that to the full board. I really don't have a huge problem with that. I mean, the department heads don't like doing that because they don't like to have, and I can understand from their perspective. But from a finance committee chair standpoint, I don't think that is a bad approach, as long as we understand that that's what's going to be happening.
So I guess my question is say we reduce the overtime budget by 100,000, drop it down to 200,000, expect some efficiencies by adding personnel. We get mid-year and overtime's pushing 200,000. Once we get over 200,000, what happens? Can the sheriff continue to spend the money that's not allocated?
He always has.
So I doesn't.
He always has.
Well, I can't continue to spend money I don't have. I mean, how does this work is my question.
Right. I agree.
Good question.
Ms.
But
Norberg,
isn't, as far as past practice, but isn't it accurate what I said,
It's absolutely accurate what you said.
Paula? In regards to if he knows that he's going over that overtime line item, he needs to bring this back to the
Yes,
finance committee.
That's your policy.
Yeah.
Correct.
But would the board vote it down? No, he'd end up with the money. He'd spend it and, I don't see that as a limit on him.
Ms. Norberg, he had his hand up.
This isn't a question about whether the board, my question is specific. If their money is not there, how can somebody continue to spend it? If it hasn't been approved by the board, you're out of money in your line item. How can they continue to incur costs?
Good point.
Last year, the money got paid for all the overtime because of COVID. So it didn't cost the county any money at the end. But in fact,
But to his point,
yeah,
how do you?
I just want to have something, some direction.
I know,
It's not past practice. My point is, if you don't have it, how do you continue to spend it?
I mean, Marilyn, I'm only referencing you because I know the struggle you had with it when we were on finance together. It was
And it's,
unmanageable.
and it's not, and it's, I know we're talking about personnel here, but it's no different if, okay, let's pick a widget. If there's money in my budget for a widget and I spend all my money for those widgets, I can't go out and buy more, can I? Well, yeah, I don't think you can.
Legally you can't. There's no fun.
So does anybody want to put together whatever? I'm tired of suggesting stuff and not have it happen.
Okay, I would hope that Paula is kind of following along with
Yes.
this.
Well, yes, I
So-
don't have anything to change yet. Is there something that I need to change?
So the change would be, okay, so the change would be giving him 3 patrols.
Okay,
So that would be at the 75-2. The 2 specific correction officers in request would be deleted. So that'd be a reduction of $144,000 there. Plus, we've reduced With the addition of the officers, the 300,000 overtime line item, I have that reduced to 270.
Yes.
So that would be a total of $174,000 reduction in the overall bottom line of the general budget. Does that follow?
Mr. Norberg, do you want to talk?
Yeah.
Yes, does your budget reflect the or the retirements of the two senior officers?
Say that again, I missed.
Does your budget reflect?
I think he's got that accounted for. The sheriff does, I believe.
That was, thank you.
So are we doing anything with the part-time line item? Because he had two part-time, or well, he had about 46,000 that he added to his part-time this year for jail people. Am I eliminating that by also? Is that staying gone, I guess, is my question.
Talk about deputies.
Well, the sheriff budgeted in part-time people for the jail. So on page 2, if you hired all of those people, I eliminated the 46,000 that he put in his budget for those part-timers. Should I leave that gone, or am I adding that back in?
Well, I guess this is where I'm at. All this needs to be moved to contingencies for further discussion until we get some more information. I
Okay,
don't know how this affects everything.
okay,
That makes sense?
okay. So then our bottom line is
Well,
400,000
I mean, we
negative
got
right
a
now.
lot of information in front of us if we just work through it, Rick. So he's asking for 196. We reduced the 46,000. So that's 100, if we would reduce the 46,000 that Paula has there on page 2, that reduces the part-time to $150,000. That's still a $6,000 increase from last year's budget. And we're adding the 3 people, 2 of which are, people that can switch back and forth. So I don't see why we can't plug that in.
All 3 of
And
them switch back and forth.
Yeah.
right.
The problem is that, okay, we need to be clear on not increasing road staff, just reducing overtime is I think our goal here, correct?
Yes.
We're not looking to add a new person on each shift and go from 2 to 3 I'm sorry,
2 to 3, 3 to 4.
3 to 4.
Right.
We're looking at just straight reduction in overtime and reduce the stress as it was hammered in our head about.
And that was part of the presentation was the emphasis, Tom, was in regards to the stress and non-availability of
Well, and-
off time
And
and
that was
being
my
able to
point,
take.
what happens when
Yeah.
they're all there then? Are they
Right.
So
like cards, because there's enough of them? I mean, well, no, but I
Between
mean,
vacations and.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm suggesting we move all this to contingencies, talk some more with the sheriff, and so we're all clear on this as
It
to
is.
what our goal is.
It is in contingency, but
And again, I think we need to have a discussion about the squads. Is there a way to share the squads and the equipment that we currently have to eliminate that from the capital budget? There's just some more questions I think that need to be answered. We can go ahead to move on here, approve a dollar amount, put it in contingency, but yet discuss it going forward some more.
Well, so what you're saying is, so we're going to take the 75.2 times 3. You're saying put that in contingencies. And then we'll on everything else have discussion.
Well,
So we're gonna
I would further
reconvene.
that by reducing the overtime by 100,000 from 300 to 200 in our budget.
Realistically, by taking people to class stuff, he won't be able to see a reduction in overtime until mid-year. Because you got class and you got everything else. So if you're thinking about a full year or half year.
I'm thinking about getting sit down with the sheriff and having some discussions on why we're where we're at currently. And I mean, I don't know if this part of this comes into that we've got, I don't know the proper terminology, lieutenants or sergeants or whatever. Are they on the road, or are they just in doing administrative stuff, or what? Are they able to go out and cover some of these shifts? These are just questions that I have because I don't know the answer to them.
So just trying, I'm trying to keep the bottom line. I'm down to a $272,558 deficit is where I'm at.
Oh, okay.
And how did you get there?
You waved his magic.
So the magic wand was to reducing the 300,000. Did not do any, let's see, did I do anything with that?
Okay, you
We were
reduced-
going back and forth. Okay, reducing the overtime budget from 300 back down to 2.
Okay,
Okay, 3 positions instead of 5.
okay.
And then, well, actually, so I guess the question there is in that reduction, so we're reducing overtime. So we gave a credit for the additional people of $10,000 per additional staff of a reduction of overtime. Do you want to just do the flat 100,000, or do you want to add on top of that the expectation of 10,000 per new employee?
Just 500.
The flat 100, okay, just wanted to ask. So the flat 100 reduction in overtime. I can't remember if I added in the 46,000 reduction in part-time. So it would take the part-time line item from 196 down to 150.
Okay.
I would think it makes sense to give him.
So you took 100 off of overtime, you took the 46,000 off of the part-time, but you added in 3 patrol.
3, yes.
And so you're coming up with 317 is what I come up with.
317 in deficit.
Yes.
What else did I miss? There was something else. Oh, we reduced the insurance by 5,000.
I adjusted the insurance by 5,000.
Sure, I did that.
Yes. And what you're coming up with?
No, I might have doubled up on
Okay.
something. So as long as, I trust your numbers better than my numbers.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. So we're at 317.
Yeah, 318,000 in the hole.
So John left. We've got 100,000 in for a new maintenance shop. I know that there's been some discussion about utilizing the old jail. And I don't know. I guess my question is if we think that money's going to be in 22 yet, or if it's going to be pushed off into 23.
Well, Greg said, I talked to Greg the other day, he said the sheriff had moved out of the jail.
Correct.
But Kevin's got stuff in there, they're trying to negotiate where to go with it.
Okay.
So I don't know where that's gonna end up at or what has to happen there.
I mean, I think something is definitely needed. My question is more is it going to be in 22 or 23? Yeah.
There was an inspection done on the old LEC courthouse or old LEC last week to come up with some preliminary ideas of what can be done to refit it. I would, as much as 22 makes a lot of sense, I think 23 is probably the realistic time frame to get a majority of this done. And they should have more information at properties meeting, which you guys probably don't have enough time to waste, but they should have the information at properties to have a rough idea of what it's going to cost to refab that to a maintenance facility.
So for the sake of discussion, and I know it's against what I've preached in the past, but I would move, we take 100,000 out of here since we do have money going into the capital fund, and that's what this would be for. That at that point in time, the properties committee could come back to the board and request the money needed to give Greg his shop, but we could take it out of this year's budget and help us with the hole that we have, but the money would still be set aside technically in capital. Does that make sense?
I know there is some stuff that they want to do. I understand you're 100. He's gonna come to you and ask for some capital improvements, some garage doors, some refab and some walls. You probably want to go down to 100, but I think 50 is probably, I know that there's projects that they want to do over there.
I'm sure, I'm sure there probably is stuff to be refurbished and stuff to make it.
Yeah, so
So let me do
User-friendly.
this. Make a general summary. I don't think we have to do it as a form of motion. We can if you guys want to. But specify that and leave it with to further notice that he wants to meet with us. We really messed something up. I don't know why you define the corrections or whatever. His job is to make reduction in overtime. Do we want to talk about cross training and all that stuff? But
Well, the only reason why I talk about that is because the patrol officers are at a different starting salary is, yeah, they're a higher salary, so that's the only reason why, Arlen. I, you know, I don't want to micromanage John, but, you know, he
is
He
there
can-
much difference?
yeah.
Didn't seem like it was a huge difference.
But
So 75.2 to 71.9.
for the deputy,
Yeah,
yeah, $3,300.
yeah.
Okay, do we need to make this motion? Do we need to make it just a recommendation?
Well,
Recommendation.
there's nothing to move. It's just where we're at,
I
you know,
do
as a committee.
have a question. You guys were at the last meeting. The sheriff's mezzanine part-time, a savings of 46,000. Was that overtime because he was gonna hire part-time people?
Yes. Yeah,
So-
it wasn't overtime. He was going to hire part-times to cover.
As well as having these full-time people?
I think he was put that in the case that we didn't give him the 2 extra correctional officers.
Okay.
I think that's what that was.
Okay.
I think that's a good question to make sure that we have understanding there.
I know in negotiations, we were talking, we never got to the union with it, but the sheriff was talking then about. Okay. I just want clarification.
So as far as the next time, we're gonna reconvene and talk with the sheriff is,
We can have a couple of actual, our next meeting. That's not that far away.
so to make sure that that happens and we don't have miscommunication that we had, I think, over the weekends, I guess we'll have Paula contact the sheriff and find out what proper day. Is there days that our group can't get together?
I know we were just saying, Arlen just said that that's finance.
Yeah.
It's only several days away.
Yeah.
When is the next finance committee?
Next Thursday.
Week from Thursday.
Is a week from this Thursday?
Yeah, it comes early.
Oh, because of the way the month falls. Oh,
Okay. That's it. The other big issue we kind of.
so it's the 10th
Was
or
the
9th.
wages
Ninth.
issue. Want to try to attack that?
It's the 9th.
Or let me do something different. Are we assuming the other parts of the budget are okay from our review
Maybe she
now?
needs
What
to
changes we did? There was very few changes in the rest of the budget.
Did we change the health department or?
Well, the levy, we had moved the health department levy and reduced it by 100,000. You-
That's subject to them getting the funds from IRA.
I didn't,
$900,000 surplus.
no,
I'd
they,
like to be part of
no,
that
700.
conversation if I could.
Oh, there's Kathy. Yes,
I'd like to be part of that conversation if I could, please. So I'm listening. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead. It was contingent on what, Arlen?
I thought it was contingent on getting the money from the grant to be able to pay us. So you get $500,000 from the grant and we reduce the levy 500,000, put that in capital.
500,000. I'm very confused now. I thought it was 100,000 you were looking at.
Yeah, Kathy, the discussion that the finance committee had was to reduce your levy by 100,000, move that over to general.
But I think what Arlen is referring to is the ARP money, and there was some discussion about paying for the health salaries this year with ARP, and then we could reduce their levy to nothing for this 1 year and replace their levy with ARP
Well,
potentially.
that
I
won't
don't,
work. That will not work because do you know, after we take out all the amounts that come right back to the county from our levy, if you didn't cut me 100,000, I'd still only have 232,500 left to go towards salaries. If you cut me, that's 132,500 to go towards salaries. Because what you may not remember is out of that $556,000 levy, $78,000 goes back for behavioral health funding, which the health department took over for the county board to meet a statute. 150,000 of that comes back for our health insurance, 88 for our IMRF, 6,000 for the rent that you implemented a few years ago. So I don't see how that would work.
Kathy, I'm not following.
I don't, you're still gonna get money. It's just gonna come from the ARP instead of from a levy. I think it's a wash.
But how can we get money from ARP that is going towards those things I just listed is what I'm confused about, I guess. I mean, wouldn't it be specific to things that could be used for?
No, not necessarily, I think. I think that's what the ARP committee is. It's one of the options out there under the ARP committee. But they are not that far along in that as to how much and what they think that they could do. So I don't know that I would change anything in the health department at this point in time. And if it's something that could be done later, then there's just going to be that much more of a savings going forward.
And where we're coming from as far as reducing your levy, Kathy, is you're showing $720,000 in carryover in reserves.
Right now, we're at about 691, and that's because in July, we did get 144,000 tax payment. But if we look to the end of the year, we're estimating about a $500,000 balance. So if you, and as you may recall, when I brought my budget, it was already 80,000 deficit. I'm not going to do anything with food fees, so take 10,000 more. So that's about a $90,000 deficit. If you add 100,000 to that, it's almost $200,000 deficit. If I did that for a couple years, our reserves would be wiped out. And Jim, you talked about how 6 to 9 months reserves is optimal. I've always had that same philosophy, and that's why I've worked so hard to maintain our reserves. I don't see the point of, taking a department that's in good stead and then in a matter of a few years, wiping out the reserves.
But remember, Kathy, is your reserve is our reserves, really. It's not your reserve is the county reserve. So you're holding on to county money. And it's kind of doubling up reserves. So when I talk about county reserves, and that includes your budget.
But when I explained that, so much of that already goes back to the county. So again, without that $100,000 cut, I only have 232,500 left to go towards salaries. 323,500 goes right back to the county for behavioral health, health insurance, IMRF, all those things I listed. So the rest of our funding comes from fees, grants, those kinds of things.
Okay. The other thing is some of those numbers, as far as your end balance comes up, I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'm seeing Paula shaking her head. Do we have a discrepancy as far as numbers go?
I guess I haven't done a projection on hers, but it didn't look like things were going that south, but maybe they are.
Yeah, because the numbers we're going by, Kathy, is that your beginning and estimated cash balance for the year was $800,000. And we had made some adjustments. We originally had you actually increasing your reserve to 100,000, but then through some changes, I've got $720,000 is where you're projected to end the year.
Well, I asked my fiscal director while I was in this meeting, and that's the figure that she gave me. And there's obviously a lot of unknowns with COVID. We've expended all of our grant money to date. Now, maybe there will be more. I'm certainly not saying that that couldn't happen. So I don't know exactly what it will be, but my point being, your 6 to 9 months reserve, I've always shared that philosophy. And I just don't want you to lose sight of how much comes back to the county from that 556,000. I've never asked for an increase. We've been at level. And in fact, back when we took on our health insurance, the finance chair at that time did tell my board that we would stay maxed while we paid the health insurance. I know that that's a former committee, but I just wanted you to understand that too.
Well, why don't, I don't want to give you guys any more work, but we need to get some discrepancies figured out here, Kathy. Because that you're giving a completely different picture than what we have in front of us.
That's fine. I can get you more information. That's fine.
Well, that would just be a matter of you and Paula getting your heads together and figuring out where you're going to be at the end of the year so that we know.
My other question was, if you proceeded with that, was the plan to be 1 year and then restore it, or what was your plan?
I think that would be something that we'd be open for discussion in the next budget cycle.
Okay.
So we're leaving the numbers kind of loose this point till we verify them.
Well, I think Kathy and Paula need to get together and get their end balance with the $100,000 reduction in the levy, and that maintains.
And Wendy, I talked to a little bit. They thought they could get some COVIS money too.
What we talked about, Arlen, is the idea that the ARPA money that funnels down could be used to offset the health, well, not just the health department, but other employees' salaries and benefits. And as Paula said, we're not far enough with the ARPA committee to know that that's the direction they want to go. So we can't say definitively, but that's an option that you and I talked about, was whether those salary and benefits could be for the health department employees that are, again, helping to mitigate COVID, could be offset by the ARPA money.
So there wouldn't be a loss of money, there'd be a different funding source. Okay. So at least we have our intent. Anything else we want to attack?
Yeah, do we have any idea, Jim or whoever was talking with Greg on lots? I think that's a big ticket item that we need to get some answers to.
What's the question?
Well,
in regards to what, right?
Well, we talked about being able to utilize some capital from lots to offset the services that the county is providing to that facility. And I don't know if he's going to get back to us or where we proceed from that, because that will help in this decision-making going forward.
Yeah, Rick, how about if I make sure to bring that back to your finance committee meeting next week? As I said, I did reach out to Greg when he was on vacation. He said, I'll get back to you on that. And then I dropped the ball because I haven't followed up with him. So I will reach out to him and make sure we've got some firm numbers by then, assuming Greg can give us some numbers, because he has to make sure that whatever he offers is allowable under the grants. And I think that was where the hangup was, is that he needed to do some research.
To be clear, you're looking at things we could charge lots to that he can get reimbursed. Is that the question?
Right. For example, one of the things that came up earlier this year was the reimbursement for the automobile insurance or the building insurance, the property insurance. That was one thing that was identified, and that already is built into this budget. But the question was, are there other things that maybe we've overlooked? And that's what I think Rick is looking for us to follow up
I
on.
mean, we've got a pickup truck in here, I think, or we did have. But, you know, we've got an employee driving back and forth to clean the facility out there in their own vehicle. So things like that are just things that we should be able to utilize if available. Yeah, maintenance has a truck in here in capital.
Who's driving the pickup?
No, we've got a person going out to clean that facility, driving their own vehicle, their own personal vehicle. And maintenance is looking for a pickup, but if lots could help us, you know, with the purchase of that.
Anything else, gentlemen?
So we're gonna reset the meeting, or I actually, I have a little bit of heartburn with, you know, because we have such time constraints at our regular finance meeting. I'd rather have this discussion, this next discussion with the sheriff outside that, because it could run longer than what we have time allotted at finance. So if we could pick out, Paula could get with the sheriff and get a day set and, or a couple of days that we all can get back together and.
Okay, so what's the availability the rest of this week in the mornings? No?
I don't.
Okay. Okay,
I've got Monday, Wednesday, Friday till 1.
okay. So what about next week early before the finance? Wait, oh, wait, I'm looking at the wrong week.
Thursdays are finance.
Oh,
And Monday's a holiday.
Yeah.
Monday's a holiday and then there's meetings all the rest of the week, so.
Our finance at 8 with the sheriff.
Yeah, we could do that. That'd give us an hour, extra hour.
And if
I mean,
we
I
ran a
have no
little
problem
over
with
that,
that.
that wouldn't be too.
Other than 11 o'clock. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
Okay.
good idea.
So 8 AM on September 9th.
Yeah.
What a guy, what a guy.
Taking one for the team.
Gotta save that per diem.
All right, so I'll contact the sheriff. Tell him.
I
what the
feel
plan
good that
is.
we actually made some recommendations. I thought it was possible we'd go this meeting and not, but it's gonna be very complicated when we play through, so. Can I entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oh, same sign. You want to stay? Let the record show that Rick wants to stay.
I figured
Not after I get
you had
done
enough
with
to
him.
pass.
He's gonna run away.